The Exeter incident, or incident at Exeter, was a highly publicized UFO sighting that occurred on September 3, 1965, approximately 5 miles south of Exeter, New Hampshire, in the neighboring town of Kensington. Although several separate sightings have been made in the area by many witnesses in the weeks leading up to the specific incident, it was the September 3rd sighting which eventually became by far the most famous, involving a local teenager and 2 police officers. As you already know, on today's menu, one of the most famous and well-documented cases in UFO history. The thing with UFO sighting is they never get old. You can re-investigate them as many times as you like, and maybe find some new information if you dig deep enough. Before we rocket ourselves into space, consider supporting my channel by buying me a coffee, subscribing and liking the videos. With that out of the way, we can start. On 3rd September 1965 at approximately 2 a.m., 18-year-old Norman Muscarello was hitchhiking to his home in Exeter along New Hampshire Route 150. Muscarello has recently graduated from high school and was 3 weeks away from leaving for service in the United States Navy. He had been visiting his girlfriend at her parents' house in nearby Amesbury. Since he did not own a car, he would hitchhike to and from his girlfriend's home, a distance of about 10 miles. However, at that hour of morning, there was little traffic on the highway, and Muscarello had walked a good part of the distance. After reaching Kensington a few miles outside Exeter, Muscarello noticed 5 flashing bright red lights in a distant field, which he initially thought might be the light of a police car or fire engine. As he drew nearer to the field, he saw the lights illuminating the surrounding woods and 2 neighboring houses in brilliant red light and made absolutely no sound. One house belonged to the dining family, who were not at home at that time. Muscarello became terrified as the object, which he estimated to be 80 to 90 feet in diameter, began to move slightly towards him. Panicking, he dived into a ditch beside the road. The lights changed direction and hovered over the dining farmhouse. Muscarello ran to the house, pounded on the door and yelled for help, but no one answered. The object then moved away and disappeared into the woods. Seeing the headlights of an approaching car, Muscarello ran into the road and forced it to stop. The middle-aged couple in the car drove the frightened youth to the Exeter police station. At the police station, Muscarello, pale and visibly shaken, told his story to Officer Reginald Toland, who worked at night desk. Toland knew Muscarello and was impressed by his obvious fear and genuine agitated state. Toland radioed police officer Eugene Bernard Jr., who earlier in the evening had passed a distressed woman sitting in her car on New Hampshire Road 108. When Bernard stopped to ask if she had a problem, the woman told him that a huge object was flashing red lights and followed her car from Epping, 12 miles away, and hovered over the car before flying away. Bertrand considered her a kook, but did stay with her for approximately 15 minutes until she calmed down and was ready to resume her drive. After arriving at the police station and hearing Muscarello's story, Bertrand decided to drive back to the dining family with Muscarello to investigate the field where he had seen the lights. Bertrand drove Muscarello back to the area of his sighting. From Bernard's patrol car, at first they saw nothing unusual. However, when they left the car and walked towards the woods where Muscarello had first seen the object, some horses in a nearby corral began kicking at a fence and the side of barn, making loud, frightening noises. Dogs in the area also began barking and howling. Bertrand and Muscarello then saw an object slowly rise from the trees beyond the corral. Bertrand described the UFO as this huge, dark object as big as a barn over there, with red flashing lights on it. The object moved silently towards them, swaying back and forth. Instinctively remembering his police training, Bertrand drew his revolver and pointed it at the object. He then decided that shooting would not be wise, so he reholstered his revolver, grabbed Muscarello, and both ran back to the police car. Bertrand radioed another Exeter policeman, David Hunt, for assistance, and while the two waited in the car for Hunt to arrive, they continued to observe the object. According to UFO historian Jerome Clark, Bertrand and Muscarello observed the object as it hovered 100 feet away, and at 100 feet altitude, it rocked back and forth. The pulsating red lights flashed in a rapid sequence, first from the right to left, then from left to right, each cycle consuming no more than 2 seconds. The animals continued to act agitated. The object was still there when Hans arrived, and he also watched it. The object finally rose over the trees and disappeared. Hunt soon heard the engines of B-47 bomber as it flew overhead, and he later told journalist John Fuller that you could tell the difference between the UFO and the bomber. There was no comparison. All three men drove back to the Exeter police station and immediately filed separate reports on what they seen. Bertrand then drove Muscarello home and told his mother about the incident. The sightings by Muscarello and two policemen received national publicity. John Fuller, a journalist for Saturday Review magazine, decided to travel to Exeter and investigate. Fuller interviewed a number of people in Exeter area who also claimed to have witnessed strange lights and unusual objects. Amongst them were Ron Smith, a senior at Exeter High School, who told Fuller that about 2 or 3 weeks after Muscarello's sighting, he was traveling in a vehicle with his mother and aunt one evening at 11:30. According to Smith, he, his mother and aunt all saw an object with a red light on top and the bottom was white and glowed. It appeared to be spinning. It passed over the car once, and when it passed over and got in front of it, it stopped in the mid-air. Then it went back over the car again. Fuller also spoke to police officer Toland and Exeter's police station. Toland told Fuller of a number of calls he had received from Exeter area residents regarding UFO sightings. A good example of the type of calls Toland had received from the Mrs. Ralph Lindsay. According to Toland, she called in here early just before dawn. She said it was right over her window as she was calling. It was like a big orange ball, almost as big as the harvest moon. And it wasn't the moon either. All the time she was talking to me, her kids were at the window watching it. Now, why would people go to all this trouble, people all over the area, if they weren't seeing something real? When Exeter police chief read the reports of Bertrand, Hunt and Muscarello, he called a nearby Pease Air Force base and reported a UFO sighting. The Air Force sent Major David Griffin and Lieutenant Alan Brandt to interview the three men. The Air Force officers asked all three men not to report their sightings to the press, but reported from the Manchester Union Leader newspaper has already interviewed them. Major Griffin sent a report of the incident to the staff of Project Blue Book, the official Air Force research group assigned to investigate UFO reports. Griffin wrote that at this time I have been unable to arrive at the probable cause of this sighting. The three observers seems to be stable, reliable persons, especially the two patrolmen. I viewed the area of the sighting and found nothing in the area that could be probable cause. Pease AFB had 5 B-47 aircraft flying in the area, but I do not believe that they had any connections with the sighting. Before we continue with today's video, please consider doing these 3 simple things. Subscribe, like and share. It will help me a lot and it will only take you a second. Before Project Blue Book could send this evaluation to the Pentagon, However, the Air Force has already issued an explanation of Muscarello and the two policemen sighting to the press. The Pentagon informed reporters that the three men had seen nothing more than stars and planets twinkling, owning the temperature inversion. Project Blue Book then issued its own explanation, stating that Operation Big Blast training mission had been active on the night of the sighting and that it could have accounted for the UFO. Project Blue Book supervisor USAF Major Hector Quintanilla wrote policemen Bertrand and Hunt that in addition to the aircraft from this operation, there were also 5 B-47 aircraft flying in your area during this period. Since there were many aircraft in the area at the time, and there were no reports of unidentified object from personnel engaged in this operation, we might then assume that the objects you observed between midnight and 2 a.m. might be associated with this military air operation. Quintanilla also added that if, however, these aircraft were noted by either of you, this would tend to eliminate the air operation as a possible explanation for the objects observed. Muscarello, Bertrand and Hunt all strongly disagreed with the Air Force explanation. The two policemen sent a letter to Project Blue Book in which they stated, "As you can imagine, we have been the subject of considerable ridicule since the Pentagon released its final evaluation of our sighting of September 3, 1965. In other words, both patrolman Hunt and myself saw this object at close range, checked it out with each other, confirmed and reconfirmed that it was not any type of conventional aircraft, and went to considerable trouble to confirm that the weather was clear. There was no wind, no chance of weather inversion, and that what we were seeing was in no way a military or civilian aircraft." Bertrand also noted that their UFO sighting took place nearly an hour after Operation Big Blast was said to have ended, which eliminated the operation as possible cause of the sighting. When Project Blue Book did not respond to the letter on December 29, 1965, nearly 4 months after the sighting, the two men sent another letter to Blue Book in which they wrote that the object they observed was absolutely silent with no rush of air from jets or chopper blades whatsoever. And it did not have any wings or tail. It lit up the entire field and two neighboring houses turned completely red. In addition to Muscarello and the policeman, John Fuller also ridiculed the Air Force explanation in print. He wrote that he had observed an unusual object near Exeter himself, and that it was being chased by Air Force jet fighter. Raymond Flower, the New England investigator for the National Investigation Committee of Aerial Phenomena, also filed a detailed report on the Exeter sightings. In his view, the Air Force explanation was also incorrect. At one point, an Air Force officer claimed that the UFOs people have been observing were merely lights from nearby Pease AFB. To prove it, he had the lights activated before a large crowd who were gathered some distance away. According to Fowler, he ordered personnel at the base to turn the lights on. Everybody looked and waited, and nothing happened. Frustrated, he yelled into the mic to turn on the lights. A voice replied that the lights were on. The very embarrassed officer slunk back into the seat of the staff car and drove off amongst the laughs and cheers of the crowd. In January 1966, Lieutenant Colonel John Spaulding from the office of the Secretary of the Air Force finally replied to the policeman's two letters. Spaulding wrote that based on additional information submitted to our UFO investigation officer, Wright Peterson, AFB, Ohio, we have been unable to identify the object you observed on September 3, 1965. The Exeter UFO sightings, and especially the initial sightings involving Norman Muscarello and police officer Bertrand and Hunt, remain amongst the best documented and best publicized in UFO history. In 1966, Fuller published an account of his investigation into this case. Entitled Incident at Exeter, it made the New York Times bestseller list. Norman Muscarello died at age 55 following a brief illness in April 2003. He insisted his entire life that what he was witnessed was real and not an ordinary object. Bertrand died in 1998 and Hunt in 2011. So what do you guys think about this case? Leave your comments down below. If you have any interesting stories you would like to share, true, fictional, creepypasta, legends, UFO sightings, whatever fits channel content, send it my way. Emails are on the screen and in the description box. If you need copyright-free background videos, visit my other channel, Monarch Free Videos, and see if there's something you can use in your own creations. No need to ask for permission. Until next time, stay safe and I'll see you soon.